Hello and welcome back to the Do's and Don'ts of D&D. This is probably something I should have started with, or been, the first episode. But today we're going to talk about starting up, like playing D&D and getting into it. So, which is something that's kind of hard to do. Because you're like, where do I begin? There's so many books. Nah. First off, what I'd recommend is going to an Adventurers League. Now, what these are is it's Wizards of the Coast sanctioned, and they basically have a couple DMs who will run games. You don't need to commit yourself to it, and they're free. Usually, these are at like comic book stores, or I don't know, card stores like Warp 2 and things like that will have them, which is really the best way to start. You have a dungeon master who knows what he's doing, so you don't end up having that one friend who is like, "Oh, I want to play," as well as you're playing through a sanctioned campaign, so it's a lot easier to start up. As well as there's people around you who are usually a lot more experienced and can help you. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, first off, it's completely free, very easy. They'll help you. They'll give you a pre-made character, and they'll just invite you into the world, and then you can try it. This is what I'd recommend for trying it. You go maybe play a few sessions, and do that. Well, let's say you... Okay, then, so... Now, there are other things. Some people don't want to do that because they feel like they might be constricted to one character. It doesn't matter, you can change, you can try different groups, different characters, all that. Now, the next part is your character. Now, some people really want to build their own character, and they get really excited off the bat. And they'll be like, oh, I want to do this and this, I don't know what to start with, though, blah, blah, blah. What I'd recommend, there's this cool site, it's called OrcPub2. Now, I'm going to leave a link in the description, but when you go onto it, it's free. It's a free site as well, because what's nice about D&D for starting up, everything's free until you want the player's handbook. But this is a site it's where I print off all of my character sheets, and then you just cross stuff out and write on top of it, which I'd recommend doing, it basically gives you an easy, cheap way of making a character. Very easy, quick. If you go through the character creation for noobs, that's how you'll do it. And it'll bring you through, it'll give you all your spell cards, and teach you how to do it. Now, before you get in, there are some basic principles of D&D that one should know. First off, there's these dice. Now, you can usually just get an app on your phone if you're just starting out and just trying it, but you'll have these 7 dice to start with if you go and just buy a box, which I'd recommend. But yeah, so if for characters, just to finish that point, because I realized I didn't really quite explain that, just go on to something like OrcPub and just pick stuff. Just pick stuff that looks good. It leads you through. You don't have to do too much math or explanation. It's not the best way of making a character. There is some stuff missing, of course, but it's great. Now, for dice, you start out with these 7. You have your D4. So when explaining dice, it'll be described as a number, a D, and then another number. So the first number, so if I said 1d4, so the second number refers to the type of dice. So this is a d4, d6, a d8, this is a d10, this is also a d10, but for percentage dice rolling. This is a d12, and this is a d20. So that's the basics of dice. If it says roll 1d4, you roll 1d4. So 1 dice with 4 sides is basically what it stands for. This is the very basic principle. You'll get more in depth. This one should be your favorite. Not that number though. Actually, quite the opposite. That number should be your favorite. And then lots of stuff is referred to on dice. Now, of course, you get advantage and bonuses based on how your character plays and all that, but that's something you'll get into later. For a start, you'll probably want to get a dice set and a printed character sheet from OrcPub too. There, now you're ready to start. There's some other basic things. So, other basic things that I think are necessities to know is rations. Any time a day passes in D&D, you lose 1 ration. When you run out, you starve to death after a week. In game, talk to your DM about that. Rations are a bit confusing. Most people don't use them. Next up is, like dice and hit dice. Your DM will explain that to you if you go to an Adventures League. I'd recommend doing that first, of course. There's movement, which is an important part of turns when in combat. Because you have your non-combat stage where you can just act, go around, do stuff, blah, blah, blah. As long as it's reasonable, you might have to do a couple rolls. Then there's combat, where it's separated usually it's separated into turns, and then usually you'll have 1 action. So that can be to attack, that can be to punch someone, bunch a tree if you wanted, because you're angry, heal yourself, all of that stuff. And then there's movement, which, as you can see here, I have this split into squares. 5 feet, so movement is based on a system of, because it's made from the US, they use the feet system, but this is one of the few times I'm fine with using feet, which is 5 feet equals 1 square. So one square is a 5 by 5, is 5 feet by 5 feet. So if, let's say you had 30 movement, you go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and that's how much movement you get. So that's how many squares you can move. Then there's another thing. I'll just go on the character sheets. Here, I'll be back in a second. I'm just going to go grab one. It's your character's, basically, here's the character sheet, for example. So you have your strength, your dex, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. This decides basically your basic stats. These are saving throws, which are varied by your proficiency bonus, which is that. So that's just a bonus. Don't worry too much about that. You can usually get your DM to talk about that, and you'll learn as you go, I've found. There's your maximum hit points, which is the maximum amount of hit points you can gain up to without special modifiers, such as temporary. There's armor class, which is when a dice is rolled. So I have 15, so let's say they rolled, that's a mulligan, a 9. So they rolled a 9, let's say they had +7 to hit, which is, if you look at your character sheet, see how that's +8 to hit currently? So if they had that longbow, they would hit me. That's just the modifier for how much extra likely you are to hit someone with things. And then this is the damage, so the damage type and what it does. So that basically means, like, fire's not effective against a fire elemental and things like that. And yeah, it's very simple once you get into it, but basically you go into attack, you roll this dice, it'd be 12, and then let's say I was shooting my longbow, it'd be +8 because that's the modifier I get. That's based on, so for things like certain weapons get either a bonus due to your dexterity and your proficiency bonus, which is determined, proficiency bonus is determined by your level, and then dexterity is chosen by the rolls you do, or depending on how you set up your character. If you go through the normal OrcPub stuff and go through the character building for noobs, it'll do all that for you, which is nice. And whatever you do, please save your character. Every character is unique when they do their rolls, and Yeah. Other things I think I should mention would be your alignment. People get really stuck up on this because they're worried that they have to follow it to a T. Is my answer to it. Not very useful. Then there's class, so that's the class you are and how many levels you are into it, which determines many things. Basically, what abilities you get and special modifiers. You got your character's name, your race, which mine is high elf, your total experience points, which every time you level up, so from like every time you get X amount of experience points, you trade that in for a level, you level up, then you continue on to the next one. Unless your DM does it a different way. Then we have hit die, which basically this character has 1d10 hit die, which means, well, since he's level 3, he has, so you get half your level, blah, blah, blah. You have a hit die for each level you've leveled up. And then you use this to calculate how much you heal on certain types of rest. Because you have a long rest where you heal the full, or a short rest where you use as many hit dice as you want. So let's say I was at only 20 health and I rolled 2 of my hit dice and I got 13 back. I'd heal back either that much, I'd add that much on, or I'd add up until I've hit my hit point maximum. What else? Now here's one which is a little scarier. This is death saving throws. So no, if you get knocked down, you're not out, unless, let's say I took 62 damage. So double your total hit points is the damage that you've taken in full. So if I was at, let's say, 10 hit points left, and I took 41 damage, or 41 damage, which would put me at negative 31, I'm dead instantly. But if I go hit 0, or in between that, I go into a thing called death and saves and failures, where basically I roll to see if I either succeed, which this would be a success because it's above 10, or let's say I rolled again and, come on, I need a bad roll, 2, so I failed. So I take 1 death saving. So anytime you fail, you lose 1. When you hit 3, your character's dead, that's it, they're dead. When you get 3 saves, your character heals. If you get 120, so if you roll why can I never find it? A 20 on a d20, which is a crit. It's a really good thing. It's really blah, 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 rare, special. You basically get straight back up to 1 hit point. You fail that, you get 2 fails, because they're not just going to instantly kill you for a bad roll. Which is nice. It's a lot nicer than D&D-E. And basically, based on how you build this creates your character stats, so where you get bonuses at. So you get bonuses in here, and then because I am proficient, I get this little dot next to it on this sheet, which basically means I get my modifier, so this modifier, plus this modifier. So basically, if they were like, somebody make a dexterity saving throw, blah, 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 I'd add that to it. So these are your saving throws. If they're like, okay, make an acrobatics check, you'd add that to whatever you roll, because you'd roll a d20. So that'd be, if that was a dexterity saving throw on my sheet, it'd be a 13. Yeah, that's basically it. There's not much else to it. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It's just a little hard to get into. Do you need... I know one thing I've been asked is, do you need the player's handbook? No. You can usually get PDFs online if you really need it. Unless you're like the Dungeon Master, you don't even worry about the Monsters Manual or the Dungeon Master's Guide. Those two are kind of off limits unless you're GM or DM. Those two, Game Master, Dungeon Master, those two terms have no difference in meaning. It's just there to confuse you when you're new, that they call it 2 different things. Now, Of course, never if you're in an adventures league or just with friends, never be afraid to ask anyone. We've all been there. We've all been the noob who thinks that you know, deaths that when you hit 0 you're dead infinitely, blah blah blah. We've all been there. We've all made mistakes. We've all accidentally attacked a teammate and not done all that type of stuff. So don't worry about messing up. Just go and have fun. Of course, I'm going to leave OrcPub 2 in the description down below. That way for you guys. My computer, which is somewhere over there for me, because I have to edit. What else can I think of off the top of my head? Ooh. Very professional. Very professional. You don't have to usually worry about getting little tokens or anything. I know a lot of times what a lot of people will do is they'll take like their percentage die and be like, that's my character for now, because they don't feel like going and getting one of those little miniatures, as they're called, which some people love, some people hate. I'm the one who loves building my own. I'll probably put a couple of videos up on the channel later of me doing that, but that's besides the point. As well as if you're just starting out as a DM, I'm gonna do in a couple weeks probably a video, well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, a video on starting out as a DM. Because I don't think I've done one of those, and I should probably check before I do one. There may be one in the Do's and Don'ts of D&D playlist, but I can't remember off the top of my head for some reason. And on my closing thoughts, I do think D&D is a game that anyone can get into and play. You don't have to try the medieval style. There is other styles, and there are things that are very close, like Call of Cthulhu that you can try. All the D&D purists are going to get mad at me for that, but it's fun. They're all fun. They're all different. There's all different versions. There's ones that you're in a zombie apocalypse. There's versions where you're... there's ones where you're in space and Star Wars and Star Trek, playing through those worlds. And actually, there's one I'm pretty sure coming out for Fallout that I don't think is Wizards of the Coast sanctioned, because I think it's called a miniature war game instead of D&D, because it functions differently, but around the same premise in my eyes. And yeah. And peace as always. Check the link in the description for OrcPub 2. Bye bye.